Shane is here. Okay, Public Utilities Commission meeting August 3rd, beginning at 3:07 PM. Members present, Charles Hathaway is present, Craig Schulte is present, staff members, Patrick is present, and Shane is present, and wastewater.
Tom, too.
What?
Oh, yeah. You're
Oh, yeah, and wastewater treatment operator, Tom Nelson is also present. That's roll call. Approved consent agenda, the 3 items on there, approved last meeting's minutes and the payments report. Are there any questions that anybody wants to pull out of the consent agenda to discuss?
Sorry, just a couple of questions on some of the big expenses here. What is DGR Engineering? What do they do for us?
Must be electrical.
I'm not
GGR.
DGR.
DGR?
Yeah.
I bet you.
Yeah, they got a couple.
Yeah, Mike is not present today, but I think we could get those, anything that I don't understand, we can definitely get brought up to speed the next meeting.
Yeah.
If we have any
And it's not
questions.
a big deal. It's just
But that's
mere
okay, we'll
curiosity.
footnote that, because be nice to get aware of the people we deal with on a contract basis.
Yeah, and then there's another kind of a big ticket, couple of big ticket charges from G&G Septic.
That's
like
for our-
35,000 or something.
That's for our biosolids trucking to Duluth for disposal.
Oh,
Then there's usually one that comes in high from WSD. It's part of that same process,
It's part of that.
getting rid of our waste product.
yeah.
Tom, can you pull that just a little bit closer to you? Perfect.
Okay.
Let's see if there's anything else here. Oh, I'm just curious, Hawkins, is that Hawkins Chemical?
Yep.
Oh, so the same, so I do a little work up at the Y, and they're the suppliers there of the pool chemicals.
Correct.
Okay, yeah,
Chemical
just curious.
Okay.
All right, that's all I got.
Okay, so do we have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
I would move to
You make
accept the
the
consent
motion?
agenda.
I'll second that. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, moving on to the first item on the agenda today, wastewater report, and Scott Schaefer is with us, and also Tom.
Yeah, I'll say, I mean, like,
Tom, okay.
last week, they wanted me to come and address the city council and explain, where some of the odor issues at the plant can come from off and on. So I gave them an education, science education last time. Craig listened to it all, Charles wasn't there. So on the bottom line, I told them that there's 2 areas that we can generate odors, and most specifically, they're a generation because of influx of loading of BOD versus production of DO. There's other stuff that can happen, like the pH or the solids, whatever, can cause a disruption in typical bacteria that grows versus, you can say, more disadvantaged bacteria that grows that can change the profile of the system of the odors. So Mike did tell you at that time that we have been working, all through the years, especially since we started this Mercury litigation process in 2015. That was when our permit was expired, and we've been operating on an interim permit since September 30th, 2015. And Scott Schaefer is an engineering AE2S that we've been involved with, and he's been to our plant numerous times. And we do have some preliminary ideas of how to handle certain situations. And Mike Roth wanted Scott here so to brief you guys on some of the ideas we're looking at and process down the road. So is that good enough, Scott?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you for the opportunity. I've got a couple slides here. It always just helps me to put a few things together. I'm going to get them up. See if I can hit all the buttons correctly. Okay, are you seeing some slides there?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so quick summary, just broke it down on timeline, looked at a little bit of history over the past couple of years, what we're doing starting a few years back, and then a little bit of the recent activity as well. So kind of 2015, 2016 time period, the previous permit renewal, this is the NPDES permitting. This is essentially the wastewater discharge permit. It expired. These permits typically go on a 5-year renewal basis. And so this has been quite long that we've been operating under administrative extension with essentially expired permit. The big thing was Mercury. Trying to figure out Mercury and what to do about it. So there was consultant selection in 2016 for the facility planning, and mostly over 2017, tailed into 2018 just a little bit. There was a draft facility plan that was put together, and so that forms a lot of the basis of the plans that were put together. And I'll go through some of that really quickly. Then some other things happened with the permitting. So I'll basically just tell the story of what we had been doing several years ago, and then there hasn't been a lot of activity until relatively recently because MPCA, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, has really been sitting on it. So the draft facility plan basically went through a lot of the normal things you do on a facility planning. Reestablished the base of the planning. We looked at what sort of growth. What we're really trying to figure out there is what are the wastewater flows and then the loadings, the pollutant loadings that come along with those flows. Then we went through the age and condition of the existing facility. The things don't last forever. And then looked at liquid treatment alternatives analysis that was primarily focused on mercury. That was the main challenge. In terms of capacity for everything besides mercury, the facility is generally sized appropriately, so you have some cushion on most of those items. There's some things, get down to individual pieces, there's operational things that can be improved. There's a number of improvements that could happen, but from a big picture perspective, mercury was really the thing for liquid treatment. We also look at biosolids, so the solids that we remove with the liquid treatment process, and we did look at comparing the existing approach of hauling liquid biosolids to dilute, to WLSSD for disposal. Tom does a good job of thickening as much as practical with the infrastructure that's there. We looked at, should we take that another step and go to mechanical thickening, and then we'd be able to essentially haul less water, or do we take it even further and take it to dewatering where it'd be a cake product, kind of like a potting soil type product, and then haul that. Looked at those. When we looked at that in 2017, ran the numbers, the capital investment was not justified by the operation and maintenance savings. Would that be the exact same answer if we reran the numbers today? We'd have to look at the numbers. Gas prices are different, stainless steel prices are different. Generally, everything's gotten more expensive. It's just to get more expensive on one side of the ledger enough to change that equation. But that was the conclusion at that time, is that the current approach is the most economical approach for biosolids. And then we also took a pretty light look at the collection system. That was mostly in the context of trying to use some previous work to determine how much cost needed to go into the collection system. That was an important part of it as we get to the portion. There's an economic evaluation with the variances. We needed that information on the collection system. There's all those pipes that bring it to the treatment facility.
Can I just ask a couple questions? When you talk about collection system, is that basically the city's sanitary sewer system?
Correct.
So we're talking about?
Just different name for the same thing, correct.
And what was the, why were you looking at that? Are you looking for like exfiltration, or how is that part of the analysis?
Honestly, it was a minor part of the analysis. What we were trying to do is get an overall cost, like a reinvestment cost that needed to go into the sanitary sewer system, because the wastewater utility is essentially one thing, and so it's harder to to segregate cost for collection from cost from treatment. So
Yeah.
we didn't want to just look at treatment in a silo because it doesn't get to live in a silo when it gets to the economic part. So it was basically putting costs onto it.
To apply for a variance, you needed to have, if you could show economic hardship, there's one way to get the variance for the Mercury. So that's why all these numbers were generated.
Yeah.
So that would be costs for maintaining this
Everything,
current system.
upgrade, maintain, it's,
Upgrade
yeah.
to meet their,
extensions,
to
I
meet their
suppose.
standards.
No.
Not extension, but upgrade what you have.
Yeah.
That economic costs, and there's numbers, and if you make this number compared to what people are making in this town, they generate all these numbers, and if you're here, you have a better chance of getting a variance for your Mercury.
Yep. So
Yeah, when we had done that was actually before the Highway 61 project. So I'm guessing you know that those costs came in quite a bit higher. So we hadn't gone and redone those numbers because the state hadn't pushed us to do that. The economic analysis of the variance, even without the higher numbers, showed that we met the criteria for economic hardship. So we could go update the numbers, but there wasn't really a driver to do that yet.
Yep. Just one more question. When you mentioned liquid treatment alternatives, I mean, the whole thing is liquid treatment. So what's that about? And also, what is the idea for how to treat for mercury? Sure.
I'll take the liquid versus biosolids side first. You're absolutely right that it is all liquid. This probably is more of a definition for the world I live in of wastewater. Like liquid, I think of as the raw wastewater comes in and the processes that you do clean that effluent that you can discharge back to the lake. Then there's the biosolids that are removed. I call that the solid side, even though it's a solids liquid slurry.
Right.
So it's still liquid, but I do call that the solid side. And then as far as the alternatives, so when we went through the facility planning process, we actually had what I call the long list of 15 different alternatives. And we took that list and narrowed it down based on feasibility and likelihood of being a recommended alternative. Narrowed it down to four that qualitatively narrowed it down to four that we took a harder look at and actually put costs to develop it. This is still conceptual level costs, took those far enough that we could put a cost to it. Still not really refined costs, but more of a comparative cost. So we looked at those four alternatives. These are basically all different variations of how to take the treatment process you already have and add another thing on the back end. In real broad terms, I talk about this like you're basically taking a wastewater plant and then put a water plant on the back end of it. That's not exactly what it is, but it's pretty similar. So look at alternative one, it's a set of actual membrane filtration. Alternative two is a granular media filtration. This would be generally similar to your drinking water treatment that you have. A little bit different configuration because we can do it a little bit differently with wastewater to optimize it, but it very similar for alternative two. Alternative three is a pile cloth media disc. That's a whole bunch of words to basically say you're filtering the water through a pile cloth. It's not exactly like carpet, but it has some similarities where it's like a backing with little fabric fingers that come out and you actually filter the water there. And then alternative four is granular activated carbon filters. Again, this would be similar to your drinking water filtration, just with a different, it would be a granular carbon media in it instead of a sand media. So different ways to do a back-end tertiary treatment. Looked at those, it basically came down to cost. The alternative three was the least cost alternative of those three. They would all work. The cloth media disc filtration would likely be, that would be the one that we would most want to pilot if we were going to move forward with it. to just remove those solids, just confirmation that, excuse me, that the solids can be removed that we want to remove. They all work, it's just, do they work well enough to actually reliably meet these super, super low mercury limits? In terms of what that looked like, when we put costs on that in 2017, it was a capital cost of about $2.4 million was the estimate. I did some quick adjustments. Depending on what construction cost index you look at, it varies from $2.96 million to $3.3 million in today's dollars. So it's been a lot of construction escalation costs, especially in the last 6 months. So, 5 years of construction escalation is 5 years of construction cost escalation. But in ballpark terms, we're probably looking in that low $3 million capital cost range. And then at the time, it was about a little over $80,000 a year estimated in operation and maintenance, incremental additional for this additional process. So that's going to be something you pay every year. So I know we've had a discussion that even if we can get some grants for even if we do really well on trying to get grants, so we can get 80% grant on this cloth media filters, there's still the O&M cost that we have to consider. And so that all goes into the thinking about how we may or may not proceed with this. So that's what we're looking at for alternatives. I think that's probably a good spot to pause and ask if you have questions on that.
I think that's good, Scott, but I think what they're more concerned about, especially because of the general public's concern, is some of the alternatives we got more for immediate or headwork control for the odor situation,
Okay.
generating more DO in the plant, because even this 3.3 million is just the mercury. It has nothing to do with the headworks remodeling or adjustments to the other part of the infrastructure that will maybe let us balance high shock loads of heavy BOD coming in with more production of DO, or where we can cycle solids here or there. So.
Correct. Okay, a couple more slides then.
Okay, but I do have one question about mercury. Why do we have mercury in our wastewater anyway?
It's natural.
It's a natural occurring element. It's here everywhere.
So it's coming out of the lake, basically.
Coming through the ground mostly.
But we
And
don't use
air.
groundwater.
No, but it
It's
comes
natural.
from the wastewater plant.
See, give him a little background on what the MPCA has.
Well, see, first of all,
Done.
it comes. They
changed their
don't care where it
standards.
comes from.
Right.
PCA.
Right.
But mostly what we'd probably determine here is coming through mostly groundwater is what my suspicion is, and they don't even care. They don't care where it comes from. But if like my opinion, where it's coming through is I, what's called inflow and infiltration. It's water that gets into your sanitary sewer system through
From the groundwater.
through a groundwater or a direct pipe in it. Let's say if someone has a sump pump and you're directing in it, that's called inflow. If it just seeps through a pipe in the ground in a crack, that's infiltration.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. So, and what our limit they want for us to have during, they propose, what we're fighting is 1.8 parts per trillion. It's nothing. It's ludicrous. So that's why we've been having, Craig's been here quite a while. We know we've been taking the MPCA to task. It's a back and forth thing with our legal counsel, their legal counsel.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So if you compared Lake Superior water to some groundwater sample from a well around here, it sounds like you're saying that the Lake Superior water would be lower, maybe substantially lower in mercury than the groundwater.
Groundwater might not have it either because it's farther down in the aquifer. We're talking about water that's only subsurface. You're picking up in your sewer pipes. You take groundwater, you're taking it from a well, it could be 200-300 feet down.
Yeah.
So that's the big difference
So
there.
it's like shallow groundwater
Yeah.
is where you think it's.
Yeah, just to add a couple more kind of little facts to this, I did the math back in 2017 on just how much mercury we would be removing. The incremental amount of mercury that we would need to remove to get to MPCA's limit on an annual basis, so for the whole year, would be less than the amount of mercury in one fever thermometer. Like it's almost a incomprehensibly small amount of mercury So Tom mentioned they want us to get to 1.8 parts per trillion. The rainwater in the vicinity of Duluth, which I know of where this has been measured, is about 10 parts per trillion. So almost more than 5 times what we need to have in our wastewater effluent is actually what's in the rainwater. And part of that is just mercury. Most of the mercury actually comes from coal-fired power plants, which can be anywhere in the world, and that mercury will then dissolve into that water, whether it's rain or lakes. I mean, you'll see mercury warnings on for eating the fish in what seem like they should be pristine lakes. Well, it's because that mercury moves through the air.
Yep.
So it's really hard to keep out because it wants to dissolve back into the water and stay in there. So it's it's really difficult to get it that way.
And where are we right now with our effluent? How many parts per trillion?
We've been monitoring it since even before then, and it varies.
Plus or
We've
minus?
had it under 1.8. We've had it above 1.8.
So-
about half the time. So
And above
But
would
Tom,
be
we're
10.
generally single digits, right?
Right.
And we come in around 50 parts per trillion and usually get it down to single digits
Yeah.
without trying. Like, there's nothing about the existing facility that's specifically designed to remove mercury, but we get a lot of good removal with the facility we have. We just don't get quite far enough.
Yeah.
if it wasn't Lake Superior watershed, we would be meeting the limit that everybody else in the state gets.
Correct.
Because we're
Everybody
special.
else in the state is at, I believe, 7.8, 7.1, 7 point something. Yeah, we'd be able to meet it. It's just Lake Superior is more restrictive. And part of it, it's not even necessarily human health. It's that mercury bioaccumulates in the fish. And so they're trying to keep the mercury extra low for the fish.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Sorry about all the questions.
It's okay.
Oh, that's all right. I actually love the questions. Is what I think of it is what we've done is in my mind, I think of it as alternative 5, even though that's not exactly what happened, but it was an administrative approach, and this is the path we've been on since 2017, 2018 timeframe. Is we did the documentation to apply for a water quality variance, and the state has been doing what the state does since then. In a broader, they're not just ignoring us. In the broader context, the state has also been working on chloride variances, it's different. It's not something that we deal with in Grand Marais. It's something that dozens of other communities are dealing with, but it was a higher priority for the state to deal with chloride variances. They're they're kind of figuring out the chloride variances, and now, so that my read on it is that's why they're coming back around to Grand Marais and the mercury variances, is we're getting back up their priority list to where we're starting to have some interaction and recent activity from the state. But that's where we've been in permitting limbo during that time period. Is anything else on mercury right now? Otherwise, I will flip over to that odor portion.
Stormwater, do we have issues? I mean,
No, that's just rehabbing our sewer lines. We've been doing that, like when they did the downtown project. It all helps that part of it.
but I mean, stormwater discharge.
Well, stormwater doesn't matter.
Really?
We could be dumping, who knows, stormwater out there from rain.
Really?
It don't matter.
Huh.
Because they don't control that.
Right.
Stormwater is generally regulated on best management practices, not actual sampling and analytical numeric limits.
Yeah.
It's more do the right things, not test the water.
So nobody's really tested the stormwater to see where the mercury levels are there?
No, I think it probably would be surprising if it was tested, but I don't know. Tom, what are you paying for a mercury sample now?
Where do we
Still
bring
400?
ours? Thing is, we send ours to North Shore Analytical, but it's such a tight sample. You got to wear a Tyvek suit and put face masks on.
when you're pulling it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because if you have a tooth filling,
You breathe.
yeah, you can breathe it. You can screw it up.
No, and I'm not saying we should test it. I was just
That's how
from what
fine.
you were saying, it was like, I wonder if the stormwater concentrations of mercury aren't high by comparison.
Sure,
Well, it probably are.
especially if it's not treated. If it's not even gone through percolation of any kind of soil.
Exactly.
Soil and Water does testing, but of the lake for stormwater, but they only do like E. coli testing
Yeah,
and
yeah.
some of that
Yeah,
stuff. So not.
All right, thanks.
Yep. Okay, so the things we're looking at for the odor mitigation, there's a lot of stuff that we could be looking at. So Tom and I kind of looked at what felt like the right primary items to look at, and I kind of put this scope together a while ago, and then we finalized the contract a few weeks ago, and so we're starting to get into this now. The four main areas that we're looking at is biosolids odor control. So what this would likely be is taking that headspace from the waste activated sludge holding tanks and actually putting an active odor control system on there where we'd have what's essentially a big fan and then granular activated carbon. We've done this with a similar system in Otsego, Minnesota, and it's worked well. There's capital costs, there's ongoing costs. You do have to periodically change out that granular activated carbon that's in the vessel. So it's a cost. So the main goal there is to get that thing preliminarily sized and put an estimated cost on it so that we can put that in front of you so that you can make a decision about it. If that's the right decision. The next two are really optimization type items that the waste activated sludge piping modifications is, as we've walked down the piping and looked at what this would be, I think it's probably a pretty modest cost, but it would allow us to avoid some of the odors. That it would allow Tom and his crew to be able to directly pump that waste activated sludge to the trucks so that it wouldn't even go into the holding tanks. So you're really just avoiding odors by kind of going around in that case. Also looked at some blower piping modifications, again, just to give more flexibility with those two tanks and the way that the blowers actually put air into those tanks. If the water levels are at the same elevation, it works pretty well to put the blowers on there and you're actually bubbling the air through there. That's not usually the case. Often those two tanks are at different elevations. What happens right now is that the back pressure from that higher water elevation forces most of the air to go into the lower water level tank. And so most of your air is actually going into the tank that you don't want it to go in. You'd rather have it going into the one that's more full, but we can't operate that way right now. So some lower piping modifications would provide additional flexibility to actually be able to isolate those so that you could independently operate those two tanks. So that would be a different way to prevent odors, is to actually get more oxygen into those solids holding tanks, the waste activated sludge holding tanks. The fourth item that we were looking at is a little bit different in that it would have some benefit even beyond odors. That it would actually, so the oxidation ditch is it's really the heart of the liquid treatment system. And right now we basically don't have redundancy with those aerators, especially in the summer. You're getting tourism coming through, a lot more people are in town, which essentially directly translates into additional load onto the facility that needs more air. So right now you've got generally almost enough, but from what Tom, you know more recently, I assume you're still not able to hold a measurable DO at times during the summer?
No, it's really low. Actually, all three ditches are under 1. Mostly are under 0.5.
Okay.
And the biggest cause too is we have indiscriminately discharges of high levels of BOD from different places, and we're working on that as a side stream, trying to identify them. And we got one person we do have a significant industrial user permit set up with already, and we're looking at another another place where we're gonna start doing sampling at their site and determining what they are sending us. And we might have to move forward there to put restrictions or get them another permit for them, so.
Is that industrial?
It's a industrial permit. It's like a permit that we have with the MPCA. We have a permit with an individual entity.
Right. But I mean, is that they're sending, it's industrial discharge from that entity?
It can be anything. It can be the school, it can be the courthouse, anybody that is sending a higher strength load and incremented, shock loads to us that we feel is it can be 5% over, what a normal BOD. It can
Yeah.
be a hot product, it can be an acid product, it can be whatever, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that ties back to just like a category of permitting that EPA set up. So there are categorical industrial users, there's significant industrial users, and there's actually a federal framework that fits into. So it's not necessarily what you and I think of as an industry that would fall under the industrial pretreatment program.
So anything that can maybe cause your plant not to meet our permit with the PCA.
Yeah.
Something is causing us not to meet our permit, we can look into, we think it's we can analyze it and test it, and then we can put controls on them.
So anybody's not sending standard household
Correct.
discharge?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really just putting some costs to another oxidation ditch aerator that would go onto the existing oxidation ditch unit. Even with your existing equipment, you're riding the line of whether you even have enough. Imagine if one of those goes down, now we're in a really bad spot. So it's partly a reliability thing, but it's also a piece of equipment that you could use just to help keep up. Now, Tom was mentioning dissolved oxygen at 0.5 to 1 milligram per liter. We really want that up to at least 2 milligrams per liter. I know that doesn't sound like much, but biologically, that it's a significant difference for how those microbes can actually break down that organic material that's in the water. The more we can break that down in the oxidation ditch before it actually gets to the waste-activated sludge tanks, we're basically pre-mitigating the odors. We're just lowering the odor potential when we're doing that. So these all fit together in how we can be improving the system to better mitigate odors. So how I've thought about this is we look at these 4 items, we put some costs to them, and then we can start to prioritize. They're not all going to be equal in how effective they'll be, but then we can look at, it's almost like creating a menu so that we can have that next conversation of what are we actually going to do to make those investments.
How do you measure effectiveness?
That's a very good question. Odor is tricky. It really is. I'll break it down into 2 categories. There's basically 2 main places where odor will be generated in a wastewater facility, and one of them is an easier answer than the other. So the first main area is the headworks or the pre-treatment. This is where the screening and dirt removal happen. That will primarily be hydrogen sulfide. That's the rotten egg odor. And hydrogen sulfide, we can measure pretty well. Like, that's well known. We can get instrumentation that measures it. You can get data loggers that you can measure it every 10 minutes, every 1 minute. We actually have a number of those set up in different places to do that measurement. So that one's pretty easy. Well, it's at least straightforward in how you measure it.
Yep.
When we're talking the solids odors, it gets a little harder. Well, it actually gets a lot harder. It's not necessarily hydrogen sulfide. It can be hydrogen sulfide, but there's a lot more diversity in the odorous compounds, most of which do not have that good analytical equipment like we have for hydrogen sulfide.
Yeah.
So like, I hate to say it this way, but the proof's in the pudding, the proof's in your nose, like, it's kind of a sniff test. There is actually, you can actually go through training. There's this device called a nasal ranger that it looks really goofy, but you basically put this thing in your nose and it pulls in air and concentrates the air, and it allows people who are trained to put a numeric value on the odor threshold. That's more common in like an industrial situation where MPCA would be bringing the regulatory hammer down on an industry because they're having odor issues. But the same concept could be applied here. For you, it's more about being responsive to your customers.
Yeah.
Is what I'm assuming we're getting at. Like, nobody wants that odor.
Right.
It's just I won't be like, I cannot sit here and say we can invest money and there will never be any odor. I mean, I could, but that would be something like, let's move the plant,
Right.
up the shore, down the shore, wherever we could put it and get it away from the people. I suspect that is not an economically feasible option that you would want to entertain.
Well,
I mean,
it'd never be any odor. That's an unrealistic goal, right? I mean, there's going to be
yes.
some odor sometimes, right?
Yeah, so I've always put in my mind, it's in terms of lowering, doing what you can at reasonable costs to significantly lower the odor threshold. Is 1 day a year acceptable? Is 2 days a year acceptable? I don't know what that number is. I know what's there right now is obviously not acceptable, or we wouldn't even be talking about it.
Yep.
So
measure by complaints per week, something.
One thing I've found is, as I've worked on these in different places, once you get one complaint, it seems to snowball. I don't know if you found that social media is part of this, but we found that in other places where social media kind of has a feedback loop where you actually get, after that first complaint, you get a whole bunch of complaints.
Yeah.
Because you might have only gotten the one complaint or two complaints for the exact same event in the past. And is that good or bad? I don't know. You're at least aware.
So alternative 5 would be shut down Facebook.
I don't have that switch, or I might actually use it.
Well, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but it seems like the approach would be like, let's try the cheapest thing first, see if it works, then progress on to add
No.
other things? No?
No, because there's other issues besides odor that are the DO causes. People only think of the odor because that's what they know. They don't know what's actually happening at the plant.
So you're saying the goal is actually to focus on the DO and try to get that up to where it should be?
In certain areas, that can make a better process, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. Is it's not as simple. It's just this. So I don't know, Tom. You and I didn't talk directly ahead of this, but that's what I've been thinking. Is let's get the numbers on it and try to put a relative value on each of those things, and just like what that buys you in terms of the direct odor benefit, the secondary and tertiary benefits, and then try to weigh those options once we have the numbers in front of us.
Yeah, like I was saying, because odor, even in your permit, is like a secondary standard. We don't have a limit of odor where the PCA is going to get on our case and give us a fine.
Yeah.
If we break some of these water quality issues that we have to continually make, that we put the water out in the lake, we can get fined or chastised or that kind of stuff where they can come at you. So we got to find whatever can help with both. See, the odor in the one area, the digester or the sludge storage he was talking about is different than the odor that's in the oxidation ditch. The oxidation ditch is the workhorse that is actually doing the process. The digester is a storage tank. So there might be some real incremental things we can do there to help that, but the more of the work needs to be done in the oxidation ditch. A part of the issue, even with our digester, is we don't have enough staff to do what you know, like you should put small loads in the digester every day. But we don't have staff for that. Even though we man it 365 days a year, it takes time. If we're doing other things in the distribution system or that, we don't have time to do that every day. So sometimes we'll do it twice a week and just put a whole bunch in it to keep our balance between our bugs and food. So when you're doing that, that is an example of putting in a high concentration of BOD product, and you can only generate so much DO to feed it. So there's operational things that if we have, more people on board would help too.
Mm-hmm.
Or a total 100% SCADA operated thing where you can set it up on a timer and it'll automatically open and close valves and squirt in a little bit even every hour, and that can help too. But that stuff's really expensive to upgrade a plant like ours for all motorized valves and controls and a computer system. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, part of it, Tom, you kind of hit on it, of the operate, like none of this works without operators. And these mechanical facilities have baseline complexity that they are difficult to staff on. The small systems require a baseline of operational time, regardless of how big they are, and it's always challenging to get to that baseline level. In a lot of ways, it's actually easier to operate a larger facility than a small one. And because of that, because the larger facilities have the economy of scale, so that they can essentially afford to have more people that are operating.
And probably the more expensive equipment makes more sense too. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess one thing like Mike was really wanted, the main thing is that, and we were trying to tell the city council at the end of that meeting there, is we know it's an issue. We're not just turning a blind eye to it. We've been working on it. And there's things that have slowed us down on the work process with this other litigation, but it is still an active process that we're working on. So
Yeah.
to let the people know that we're not just turning a blind eye to it.
But it's quite separate, right? Solving the mercury problem doesn't really do anything for your odor problem.
It
and
doesn't,
vice
but at the
versa.
same time, when you're trying to upgrade a $5-6 million project, you want to get everything you can for the $1.
Yeah.
You don't want to have to do this and then come back and do mercury and change everything. So that's the basis, trying to do it once.
Yeah.
But it might not work that way.
And I mean, your site is really, really tight. And I've always been operating under the assumption we're not going to get more land adjacent on that site.
Well, if we make more smell, lower the
We'll get
property
more-
value.
We'll get more land.
Yeah.
The town will
phase
move
one.
half a gram
Make
rate.
more smell. Phase 2.
Yeah, well, I
Negotiate
have
property.
thought about it in those terms. But,
Well, you don't want everybody in Grand Marais to move out though.
No. Okay. Is that everything, Tom? for-
Yep, you
Okay.
guys got enough.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate your time.
well, thank you. It's been good. And
Yeah.
if there are follow-up questions, work through Tom or Patrick to
Yep.
hit me up and by email until the next time.
So just curious, what are next steps? I mean, what happens now?
Well, if you guys want to move forward, he can come up with some harder numbers to do different aspects, and then you can, and if you want us to do more analysis to determine what's going to happen with those numbers, we can do that. So we have another thing we're doing right now,
We got some-
working with another entity. We're going to do some internal sampling at their facility
Yeah.
to determine what kind of loads. I got to get a hold of a person with a sampler and set up to, it does like a 24-hour sample, and we'll grab that. And once we get that set up, then we can determine if, what kind of loads they are sending to us, what time of the day they're sending us.
Oh,
Is
that's
there any way that they
affecting-
can mitigate some of their loads ahead of time, so they can do their own pre-treatment? And if we have to address the issue with them directly, then we address that. Our other industrial user, we can reanalyze that, we can rework his permit if things need to be tweaked there to make the operation better. More work that they could do on their end to help our end, we can put those controls on there. It's a control mechanism that we are allowed to put on
Yeah.
individual users.
So it's how you have some suspicion that the problems with odor have to do with a couple of these individual dischargers who may be sending too much BOD into the system. And
At
make
one
it-
time.
Yeah, I mean, in a slug or
Right.
something.
Yep, slug loads.
Yeah,
But people don't understand, it's just it's like getting sick. You can get sick right away, but how many days does it take you to recover?
yeah,
Especially if you have a stomach, sickness or diarrhea, that's the same thing. A shock load can kill our bugs, our good bugs. Bad bugs, I can smell the difference between a good mixture of what's called anaerobic bacteria, when it starts to get a facultative bacteria, or more of an aerobic bacteria and filamentous. I can smell it in the plant. I can smell the water, the bacteria, how it changes. And then I know it's coming, but then it's too late because it's already knocked your oxygen supply down. The good bugs aren't working, the bad ones are. The bad ones are more stronger at low DO, and so it can take months to get it back to the system or the levels of the good bacteria that you
Yeah.
want to work versus the bad bacteria that's taking over.
yeah. Well, it seems like it'd be worthwhile to figure that out, right? If these guys, if that is really the
Right.
issue.
That's
what
that's
we're
a
doing.
step we're working on.
Yeah, yeah.
Plus, we can do the steps that we're, with Scott to help with, the plant too, because these people that are sending us this product, they're also high revenuers for the PUC,
Yeah,
per se, so I mean, it's,
because they pay for that extra load.
well, one is paying extra, the other one, we're gonna have to work on that aspect of it too. That's part of our analysis of what they're sending.
Yeah,
Because if a regular incoming flow, let's say for BOD in our place here is around 100, called 100 milligrams per liter. Some of these other entities can be sending us 3,000 to 10,000
Oh my gosh.
milligrams per liter. Now they might be only sending us 4,000 or 2,000 gallons versus 300,000 gallons, but that shock load when it hits, you're trying to treat that.
yeah, yeah.
So those are issues that between the PUC, the city, and these other entities, we're gonna try and work it out so everybody can have at least a mutual agreement upon solutions on everybody's end that can work.
Yep. So what would be helpful from us, from the PUC?
Well, I guess right now is if we get numbers, especially maybe how to get numbers to generate more oxygen in the oxidation ditch from them, some different processes, they can give that to you, because that's something we should do anyway, because the redundancy in it, and run it through you guys. If the budget looks like it's something we can handle and do, then you guys approve the full-blown study, and then they get the study done, they get all the mock-ups, and they put out the bids for the work.
So do you need permission from us to go forward with that?
I don't know if we
first-
do it for the preliminary study. I'm not sure where Mike left that in the contract with you, Scott.
The contract that we just got from Mike just had the initial part in it. So it would be, and the thought was we'd look at this initial part, concept level, and figure out how little or how much we would move forward into the next stage with. So yeah, there would be an action at that point where we put a scope and fee, basically put together a contract to have that next discussion of what we would
Scope
actually
of
move
work,
forward.
yeah.
How I would see that going is there'd also be the financial part. The next time the next discussion might just be the findings. The one after that, we'd probably start talking about funding and how going into the funding cycle. And if you're able to, if the costs are modest enough that you can pay for it independently without having to go through the state revolving fund loan process like that. That's there, but it slows everything down because you have to then work it in their annual cycle.
Right.
And, so as I'm looking at when these things could happen, we could have this built we could have most of those pieces in place for the 2023 season if we didn't have financial constraints. Like, we'll have to order, even if you told me go right now, We wouldn't get it in before the winter because we wouldn't even be able to order the stuff and get the actual equipment on site. Like the lead times are too long. But I think it would be realistic to get it in for 2023. Now, if we have to go through the state financing and get into all their stuff, realistically, we'd be looking at 2024
Yep.
because of the next time on the state financing. You're still moving it forward. You still got the answer of this is what we'll be doing. It's just like, it's kind of gauging urgency.
But
And-
and this is the oxidation ditch improvements we're talking about.
Yeah, but then you guys want to balance, do you want to do that improvement, or do you want to do the Headworks improvement that's needed, and do you want to do, I mean, there's other improvements that are needed. Headworks means everything comes in, like the separator stuff, and that needs to be done too, so it depends how big of a chunk you want to bite off to, do one thing. If you want to do it in pieces, we can try and do it in pieces. If you want to do it in one, lump sum, you do it more of in one lump sum.
And you do get better pricing if you've got a bigger package. And, I mean, the reality is, as you well know, for the Minnesota contractors, you're kind of the end of the line. So as far as I haven't talked to contractors recently about doing some of this work, but the answer's always been the bigger the project, the better the cost per piece will be. There's some economy of scale there.
Yep.
And it kind of depends on the project. Some of these projects, like if we were doing the granular activated carbon odor control system, like that's relatively discrete. There's not a ton of mobilization with it. That one could probably be somewhat independent. You start getting into concrete and just depending on what kind of crew they need, it could be a different answer. So there's a lot of factors in this, and getting the thing built is a big part of what we think about it. And which contractor are we going to get there to actually do that? Because it's specialty work.
Yep. So what do you think would be most helpful at this point?
I guess if it was mine and I owned it right now, I would try and compare the cost just to get the redundancy of the O2 and the oxidation ditch. And if it's a small enough number, comparative to the other stuff, I would try and go forward with just that. If we need to do the Headworks, which needs to be done, which is, I know is going to be a bigger project because that'll be concrete design change, it'll be bypassing pumps and all this kind of stuff. Maybe that could be tied with the piping issues and some other part of the infrastructure down the road. But if I was going to be there any longer, I'd like to see somehow get more air in that oxidation ditch because it would make operations smoother, not just odor issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that oxidation ditch makes me nervous. It does. It always has. Just that you're kind of riding the line already, and there's not much room for error.
We had one bearing go on one of the discs on one side we were down to only 2 versus 3 for 2 weeks. Actually, I'm surprised I took that pillow bearing only 2 weeks to get here.
Yeah, that's fast right now.
Yeah, so we got it back in operation in 2 weeks ourselves. I mean,
Well, and I feel like there's a little bit of slippery slope there anyway. The oxidation ditch has some structural concrete that made, even 6 years ago, it already wasn't in that great of shape. I think if we put on the additional aerator, I'd actually look at putting on another aerator and another aerator like that because
Sure.
I think another aerator would get you back to where I'd be feeling good about it. Actually adding another one after that, you'd have true redundancy where you could have one out of service and still be operating well. But any of those, like you want to have them have a good foundation with the concrete. I think at least that concrete work probably needs to be considered.
that one spot.
I'd be in getting your concrete so it's in good shape.
Well, so I
So-
just don't want us slowing things down. So I don't know
Okay.
what our authority is here or who has to approve this or.
Well, we'll wait for Mike to come back. And
Yeah,
then
we'll follow up with
and then
Mike.
Mike will get all the.
Yeah.
Um,
And
Yeah.
the problem is we don't meet for another month, so unless we
can meet
had
if-
an
We
emergency
can,
session.
we can meet though, I mean,
You
We can, if there's a necessary to meet and
So
put
do you want
something
to talk to
together.
Mike and then just let us know?
Yeah, we'll tell them what you guys.
We can tell him what we talked about. He's gonna be gone for a week, I believe. He'll be back.
One more, I think, next Wednesday.
Next week he'll be back? Okay,
Yeah,
Good.
yeah, that'd be
So-
good.
yeah.
So, yeah, so you'll talk to Mike and get that figured out?
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
Yep. Okay.
So, well, thank you for the opportunity to meet with you.
Yeah,
Great.
thanks, it's been great. It's been really interesting and informative, so
Great.
appreciate it.
Thanks,
All
Scott.
right, see ya.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I know this is stuff Mike's aware of. I mean, he's been talking about this, and we've been following this, at least the Mercury part of it, through the city council.
5 years, right?
But there's, yeah, for quite a few years, but, you know, when you're gonna go spend money on something, you wanna make sure you're spending the money on the things you need to spend it on.
Yeah.
That's gonna help with kind of maybe all of these little issues we got going on, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the thing we gotta look at, is the scope of the project. And what do we choose to do with it?
Yeah. I think it'd be really helpful to know really what's coming in from those on the industrial permit
One
side.
does sample. The one we have with the industrial user permit, he samples. He has to sample twice a year.
Yeah, but that's not much, is it?
No, but the basic product that he has is pretty standard around the,
And the flow rate's the same.
yeah, I mean, we know what he brings in, because we bill him on a usage, you know, and it's a different rate than the residential, but it's still, yeah, I mean, if you want more sampling, or if you want more, that's part of our process that we can work through. We know just from people who've been sampling forever, we know certain products, what their standard is. It's the non-standard things, like a standard household person that lives in the cities, you know, they give so much, you know,
Right,
that's,
right.
it's an engineering standard. If you have a house in the country, and you got four people in a house in the country, and you have a septic tank, and you have it pumped regular, you know, they know what's in it. Those numbers have been generated, they don't change that much. It's anything that's outside that realm of normalcy is, it can cause you loops that you're not prepared for.
Right.
And they can come and go. I mean, let's say, if we got a flow coming in at 300 gallons a minute, and if we're not there, you know, let's say even at night, or if we're out working, it don't take long for a 5,000 or 10,000 gallon load of something different to come through, and you don't even know.
Yeah,
You don't see, you're not there.
yeah.
So,
And those flows they're not consistent. They're not like a steady rate of 100 gallons per minute or
no, it goes
something.
up and down.
Yeah.
There's pumps all over town that come on and off too.
Yeah. Like lift pumps?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like a heartbeat half the time. It goes up and down like a wave. Sometimes it goes up higher, and sometimes
Hmm.
and sometimes in the winter at night it flatlines.
There's
So
nothing.
because it's so low,
The plant works pretty good in the wintertime.
it works good most of the time.
Yeah,
It's
well, I
just-
mean, it's just the flow is,
Yeah.
this is the time of year where the flow is definitely,
Cranked way up.
yeah.
It's like having broth. You're treating broth soup versus treating split pea soup that's been sitting on the stove for a week. You know, it comes in like, you know,
Yeah, it's coming in, changing every
you can
day.
drink a whole gallon of broth, but you aren't gonna get more than a tablespoon of thick pea soup in your stomach and have it not upset it, so.
Okay, well, thank you, Tom,
All right,
Yeah,
for your
thanks.
time.
yeah, but I gotta head out, so.
Okay. Talk to you
Shane's
later.
left.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Okay, moving on
I still
to,
got your note on my desk when we can get there, but
All right.
we had one guy leave, so
Yeah.
we're short.
oh yeah, you sure,
Yeah.
for a tour?
So-
Yeah.
Yeah,
So there, we're in a search.
Yeah. Well, good luck.
Yep.
yep, thanks, Tom.
Mhm.
All right, moving on to E, we have Shane gonna give us a little background on the EV charging summary.
Yeah, so back in June, Mike asked me to put together kind of a 1 year summary of the public EV charging stations because the end of June would have been 1 year since they came online. and I was set to present that at the July meeting, but there was no July meeting. But I had already arranged with WTIP to give them an update. So you may have already heard these numbers on WTIP.
I missed it.
Good, then it'll be fresh. But I wanted to start with the EV charging pilot program first, because the last time we were together was when that was approved, and it got a lot of interest right away. And I
Good.
say a lot, like four people contacted us and asked questions about it. And so far, one person has gone through and signed up, and they're on the new EV rate. And they have their charger hooked up, and so they're getting billed at 30 cents a minute between 8 a.m. or 30 cents a kilowatt hour between 8 a.m. and 11 p.m. And then they're getting half price from 11 to 8. So we do have one person up and running. So that's the update there. We're still
Just, so, I mean, are you trying to get 3 more, or?
Yeah, we're trying to get a few more. And like I said, there's 3 other people that were
Have
interested.
interest.
I know one is going to do it eventually.
Yeah.
They're just kind of working through the process.
Yep. And again, what's the results of the pilot program that you're hoping to, like, what are you hoping to figure out through this?
We're just trying to see, to make sure that we can do it, because this is a new thing with our new meters, our smart meters.
Yeah.
They can track 2 rates and time of use.
Yeah.
And so, but getting the meter software to talk to our billing software was pretty complicated. And so we're starting with a pilot just to make sure we get all the hiccups worked out
Right.
before we open it up to
I
more
see,
people.
I see.
Not saying that if we open it up to everyone, all of a sudden there'd be 50 people signing up, but we didn't know. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So the other thing in here, and the bulk of the memo, is the numbers for the first year of our charging stations. And the first year's been really good on our charging stations. We're a destination, so a lot of people come and visit us, and a lot of people with EVs will pick places with charging stations to travel. And so compared to other Simpa cities, we're doing quite well. For our size, you know, we're not out competing Rochester or Owatonna, but those are huge cities. And I think North Branch is also doing well, but they're right on 35. They're right on the corridor there, so a lot of travel happening there. But first year, 600 and what I write here, 604 total charging sessions, all about $5,000 in fees. Most charging is happening downtown, so 95% of the charging is happening downtown. And I imagine that 5% that's in the campground is either people that are staying at the campground or people finding out we're full here, and so then they go over to the campground. And most of the charging is happening on the level 2 chargers. I'll just get the number right. 28% is fast charger usage.
Okay.
So 72% on the level 2 charger. And then in the memo, there's some graphs just kind of show trends, and they're kind of what you would expect following highest usage months or summer months, and stays pretty high, little dip, but stays pretty high September, October, and then November, and then like March and April are pretty low. But December saw, a little bit. That data I think will get much more interesting as the years go by, because we'll have more years to compare with. And then over the course of a day, most people are coming in and charging between noon and 7. We still see charging over every single hour of the day, but mostly following that kind of typical day where, if you can imagine someone is at a hotel or whatever, or traveling up the shore, they're coming and plugging in at lunchtime and shopping and getting a meal. And then the last graph just shows the distribution of how long people are charging. And most people are charging for less than an hour,
Hmm.
but there are a couple recorded charging sessions of greater than 10 hours.
What?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So they
how-
just left their car plugged in and forgot about it?
They left their car plugged in, and maybe they didn't forget about it. Maybe they just plugged it in and walked back to their hotel, or walked back to where
Left it
they're
overnight,
staying.
maybe?
Left it overnight there. The longest recorded session for someone being plugged in is 16 hours. So they
Well-
didn't charge for that whole time,
Right.
No, but,
but they're
okay.
there. And there's really
It
nothing-
records the session, but the car may have charged in 2 hours.
right.
Right, so
Yeah.
they're, right, I see.
And
It's
I
being
think-
occupied.
Yeah, I think in this case it charged for like 8 hours.
Okay.
And then
Sat there.
it sat there, and they slept in and got breakfast, and they're like, well, the car.
Yeah.
It's plugged in at the I'm trying to picture like how did this happen?
Right.
Because they're not intentionally leaving it there, but maybe
No.
they are. Maybe like,
Kind of
it's
bad
parked.
though, right? Because
Somebody else could have been.
Right.
Is there anything on the machine that tells them, like, what if somebody pulls up to it and wants to use it? Then they go, okay, we'll come back in a couple hours. They come back and the car's still there.
Yeah.
And they come back 2 hours later and the car's still there.
There's nothing that
Does-
says that.
There's nothing on the screen that'll say charging completed or anything like that?
Oh, I think there is. I think their car tells them
Because they
their
could park
charge is
next to it
completed.
and unplug it,
Right.
put it in their car,
Right.
and
They
start
could do
their
that.
session.
And there's got to be some kind of etiquette between EV drivers not to do this kind of thing.
Yeah.
not to leave it plugged in.
Yeah,
right?
like come on, finish your charge
Right.
and then
Right.
get off it. And I like, but I guess what to highlight this distribution shows that 99% of people are plugging in and then getting
Yeah,
off.
yeah.
They've got a timer, they set a
Yeah.
timer, yeah.
That there's some people and like a couple cases that have plugged in and then left,
Yeah, yeah.
or gone to bed. Or
Pretty
whatever.
rare.
Yeah, it is really rare.
No, that's kind of weird. yeah.
The average charging length is 2 hours 40 minutes on this level 2 chargers. So $2 an hour. So that's it's got a little less than $6 fee they're racking up, and then the average
Yeah.
charge on the fast charger is about 40 minutes, and that includes that's from when they pick up the plug to when they put it back onto the charger. So most people are getting in and getting out without taking up the parking space for too long. And then I wanted to share one more. Thought there was one more piece. I just thought it was interesting since we just finished with July. July's numbers were pretty interesting. July 2022, so not included in the data that was in the memo. 143 charging sessions in July, and about $1,500 in fees. So July this year is bigger than July last year.
By a
So-
lot, right?
Yeah, by a lot. So our charger is getting more. I mean, people know about
It's
it.
known, yeah.
Yeah, it's known, and hey, there's a fast charger in Grand Marais. So I'll be interested to see how August's bump comes along.
So we like this because it's revenue, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's like, and are we paying rent or something on the machines?
No.
No, they were supplied to us by Simpa.
Well, let's get another one.
How about the one in the park? Was that Simpa too?
Yeah,
Okay, there's
Yeah.
one down there.
there's one down there.
No, your numbers, that include that one?
Yep.
Okay.
That one's really not. It's underutilized, but it's kind
Yeah,
of the overflow.
it's kind of like a, do they have, we don't need, when people come into Grand Marais, if you have an EV, they know where they are.
Yeah.
Okay, so
They-
that's probably, if this is full, like you said,
They'll go.
there's another one over at the park. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
And just a little background on that one. We wanted to put it at North House, and they had given us a space in their on the inland their inland
The
side.
green, by the green building?
Yeah, on
Yep.
the north
Yeah, yeah.
north side of 61, they had given us a space there.
Oh.
But then this was also right during Highway 61 construction, and it was going to be a delay until that was over. And
Mm.
so we decided, we're just going to put it in the campground and just get these things in because
Yep.
Yeah, I'm a little,
I think that's,
I'm a little serious about getting another one. I mean, would that bring more revenue, do you think? Or there's not waiting as it is, and so adding another one wouldn't make any difference?
So first of all, they are pretty expensive. Like the fast
Simpa
chargers,
pays?
$50,000.
The fast charger's
Simpa's
50
not going to pay. They gave us the
They got us
number
started
that
on
we
this.
got As a demonstration.
Yeah.
And I think the policy we want to go forward with is, hey, this is possible up here. These are doing well up here.
Yeah.
And Grand Marais, we're a resource for businesses that want to put them in themselves. And there are a number of businesses that have reached out and said, hey, tell me about your charging stations because I'm interested in putting these in our...
Like
and that
hotels
would-
probably.
Hotels, and just some other businesses that are like, hey, I've got this space and I was thinking about a charging station here. And I kind of talk them through our process and yeah, it's kind of a big commitment to put them in though.
They put those in, then they get the revenue, yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, if they want to collect it.
They invest the 50,000 or whatever.
If they want to invest, there were some programs, I know when I had the gas station, there were some pilot programs for EV charging stations for gas companies put out, I don't know if that's for the state of Minnesota or what it was, but
Yeah, there was some money from.
there was some money, but it all disappeared real quick, and I don't know where the stations where they got put, or what companies got the
Yeah.
money, whether it was grant money or whatever, but it was,
There was grant money from the state that came from the VW settlement when VW was caught cheating on emissions. They had to settle and it got distributed throughout the states and Minnesota decided to put that money into EV charging network and there were different phases of that for level 2 chargers and then there was a phase for kind of putting charges along whole corridors, so like all of Highway 61 or all of I-35 or whatever. And there was more money in that for other parts of EV charging and electric vehicles. Most of the money I think is gone for charging stations because we seem to have built out the network enough. Not saying that there's enough chargers. As more vehicles come on, we're going to need more charging stations. But I think we're kind of looking to local businesses to broaden the network.
The distribution, yeah.
And there's interest. There is interest from local businesses who are.
But I mean, $5,000 a year, but we get the things for free, but that's pretty nice. I mean, even at 50,000, 10-year payback, not bad, right?
well, the lodging industry would be one industry, I think, that would look into it simply because, it's a destination. When you're in your car, you park your car at the hotel, and that's where it sits all day while you walk around town. And at least where we are, people can walk
Yeah.
in our small town, so that would make sense, the lodging part of it. And then there's how many charging stations in Cook County? There's
a couple in Lutsen and
Lutzen.
I don't.
Ski Hill have any?
Portage?
Is there
There's a
some?
few on
Is there
the
some up in
trail.
the Ski Hill?
Yeah. There might be some. up-
REA has some, right? Arrowhead Electric.
Yeah, they've got a few charging stations along their network. Kind of to your point, like the idea that and in the climate action plan, kind of setting an example and then hoping the community will also take some action as well. And
Yeah.
so we've set an example and let's leave the space open for the business community to invest
expand.
in charging stations because it could be a good business opportunity for someone
Yeah.
in town, whether it's part of their existing business or I don't know if you could just set up an EV charging business, but the more we have, the more competition there will be for the EVs that are on the road. But now looking down the line, there's going to be more EVs,
Right.
so there'll be a need for more charging stations.
Yeah. I mean, 5,000 is a lot, but I'm just thinking, well, if the revenue
Well, it's
starts for the
interesting to
city.
see what's gone on in a year. So now we have a year under our belt,
Yeah.
actually. I mean, and you got July going right now, so it'll be interesting to see what August does. That takes us back,
Yeah.
back again. We'll be sitting here a year from now just to kind of see how we compare the first year with the second year and with the same amount of,
Yeah.
see what the usage is. That's the big thing, the units.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because anytime someone picks up one of those plugs and puts it back, it counts as a charging session. So if you walk out there and you look, oh, that's kind of cool, and you look at it.
People do that.
Oh, a
Over
lot,
there, I know.
because when I download the session for the month, I have to go through and filter out all the zeros.
The 1 second ones?
And delete
Yeah.
them. It's like, oh, this doesn't count. Delete that. And
Yeah.
so it's sometimes I'll download the report and it'll be like 500 charging stations. Wow. But so people are picking them up. They're interested.
Yeah.
They're kind of like, oh, what's
They're
this thing?
curious.
How does it work? Yeah, what
Yeah,
it's all about.
so
Huh. Huh. So, at this point, it's just keep going as we are, and
yeah, the whole, I mean, operations and maintenance is pretty simple. We haven't had to do any maintenance on them. They're functioning, and as far as operations, it's just the end of the month. I download the data and
Yeah.
then send the revenue to Kim, and she does with that what she does.
Yep.
With the dollars, and then the platform that we use for collecting fees, this company called Zeph, they take 10% of the fees for kind of housing our tracking and fee collecting system.
Hmm.
So $5,000 in fees, we only retain $4,500.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
it kind of, you have to.
Mhm.
It
It's not something we do it ourselves.
we couldn't do it ourselves. We need a payment platform, so that's how that
Okay.
works.
Hmm.
Now, do we have to report any of this to Simpa? They want to know how their equipment's working or how it's going, or is there a report we send to Simpa to, do you know, or is
I
that
haven't
something
sent
that we
any report to
voluntarily would
Simpa.
do, I guess?
They've been able to look at all of the cities' charging usages.
Okay.
So they had our data.
Okay.
They're able to see all the charges on their network, and yeah. And so we were in a Simpa board meeting a couple months ago, and they were like, "Oh, here, by the way, here's how the charging stations are going," and they threw up some graphs, and there's Grand Marais
Oh.
right there with
They already have it
Rochester, and
Nice.
yeah. So it's pretty good.
Maybe
Pretty
they
good
want to
see
give
that.
us another one.
So they have our information already.
Yeah. Somehow.
Yeah, uh-huh. Well,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah. Good,
Okay.
well, that's very interesting. So
Yeah.
good program. Seems like it's a good, as you say, it gets us sort of on the charging map, and that's useful.
Yeah. It is. And the location seems to be ideal for.
Good location.
You know, what'd be
Um,
interesting to know is how, I don't know how you find this out. Like, are people waiting? Like, is there a queue at these places? Because if there is, then it suggests there's a need for more stations.
Yeah.
If there's not, then it's okay, fine.
I'd say that since we're only seeing 5% usage over at the campground, there's not
Not.
many people waiting because they would go plug in over there.
Right.
Yeah.
Another way to check that may be to go, I don't know if there's like reviews of charging stations on
Oh,
PlugShare
yeah, yeah.
or some EVs, but I could go look at that and see if there's any negative comments on Grand Marais, always full or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Always have a, Hummer
Yeah.
plugged in there, or not plugged in, but hogging up the
Somebody
spot.
parked in a way. We've had that happen too. People park
Yeah.
over there.
No.
But now we have signs that kind of, I think it's less of a problem right now.
Or it could be you see, like, this guy charged from 2 p.m. to 3:30, and then did somebody instantly plug in right after,
Yeah.
which kind of suggests there was somebody waiting.
Yeah, it could be. We could,
I wonder if you could extract that. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't either. It might just be looking out the window. I mean, right now would be a great time to just go see, like, is it full? There's a lot of people downtown, a lot of parking spaces filled
Right.
up. Are people desperate for a space, and will they plug in, or will they park there without being an electric vehicle? Or it's not actually like all that novel to see EV charging stations, so people know not to plug there, I think, or park there.
Park there, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when we didn't have signs there, it was a problem, but now that we have it signed, I think it's, every time I go through or drive through here, walk through here, there's either a car plugged in or the site's empty.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
It's
Nobody, no people
Yeah,
are
no one's
not parking.
taken the spot that
That's
they
good.
shouldn't be, so it's been pretty good. And that, of course, aids in the fact that we want people to use them, and we don't want people parked there that shouldn't be there. So
Yeah.
I think it's, yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Shane.
Yeah, thanks.
I don't have anything else. You,
I have one question. We were at some point going to get a presentation by Mike Roth about public meeting law. I don't think that ever happened, did it? I don't think I missed it.
I'm not positive about that.
I don't
I'm
know.
pretty sure it didn't happen. But I'd like to get that somehow on our agenda for next time,
Okay.
if we could. I don't know how that happens.
I'll just tell Mike and I'm sure we can set that up.
You tell, it's like, I'll tell Mike, Mike, you get in there.
Well, we'll put it on his questions
Yeah,
for
that'd be great.
Mike.
That'd be great.
Okay, so being no further business, I need a motion to adjourn.
I would be happy to supply that
Okay.
motion.
I
I
will
move
s-
to adjourn.
I will second that, and we will adjourn at 4:27.
Very good.
Thank you.